Hello, government students. Today we're going to be doing notes 1.3, the U.S. Constitution. Your essential question: why is the Constitution known as the supreme law of the land? So don't forget, for every set of notes, you do need to have a title on there, so make sure you title these notes, write down that essential question, and then you'll have a summary at the end. I'll stop reminding you after we get through this first unit, but just want to make sure everyone knows those three elements are required for your notes. So, the Constitution of the United States of America is known as the supreme law of the land. The Constitution is a really brief document. If we were in my classroom, I would show you on the wall. It's just four small posters. It's pretty small. It sets out the basic principles for which the government was built in the United States. It's a brief document. It is separated into 8 different sections. We have the preamble, which is like the introductory paragraph. We watched that Schoolhouse Rock video about it last week. And then we have the 7 articles of the Constitution. The original document is followed at the end by 27 amendments. We'll go over those amendments through an amendment project later on this week. So this is the layout of the Constitution. This is what it looks like. There are 6 basic principles of the Constitution. The first is popular sovereignty. So, us in the United States, we believe that the government can only exist with the consent of those being governed. So, if you don't like what's happening with our government, you have the authority to participate, to get involved, to vote, and remove people from office. We also have the principle of limited government, which restricts what the government can do, and it protects individual rights that the government cannot take away. We also have the separation of powers. Our government is separated into 3 independent, equal branches of government: the legislative, the executive, and the judicial branches. Those branches can check each other, so we have checks and balances, which gives those branches the ability to restrain the actions of one another. So, an example this week, we have the legislative branch attempting to check the executive by introducing articles of impeachment against the President of the United States. We also have judicial review, which gives our court systems the power to determine the constitutionality of government actions. So the Supreme Court gets to say whether laws are constitutional or not. And then finally, our basic principle number 6 is federalism. So that is powers divided between the central government and local governments. So we have our government in Washington, D.C., but we also have our government right here in Sacramento for the state of California. And then also smaller governments, like here in West Sacramento, we have City Hall, which determines our government for West Sac. Right, so our layout of the Constitution, our introduction, remember, is the preamble, which gives us the purpose of the Constitution. We also then have Article 1 of the Constitution, which describes our legislative branch. So we're really going to dive into deep on the legislative branch today, and then tomorrow we'll go into the other branches. So the legislative branch is the House of Representatives and the Senate. Those are 2 of the houses of the legislative branch. Both of them together make up Congress. This is the Capitol building, which is where Congress does their job. They create the budget, they write laws, they determine what powers are going to be granted to themselves, Congress members, and what powers are going to be denied to states. Article 2 is the executive branch. This determines the president, the vice president, what their powers are, what their duties, responsibilities, and it describes how they are removed from office. Article 3 is the judicial branch that sets up our federal court system, so our Supreme Court of the United States. It defines crimes like treason and describes the powers of the court system. And we have a Schoolhouse Rock video that's going to tell us about our 3 branches of government.
Gonna have a 3-ring circus someday. People will say it's a fine one, son. Gonna have a 3-ring circus someday. People will come from miles around. Lions, tigers, acrobats, and jumpers and clowns galore. Tightrope walkers, pony riders, elephants. governments, and so much more. Guess I got the idea right here at school. Felt like a fool when they called my name, talking about the government and how it's arranged, divided in three like a circus. Ring one executive, two is legislative, that's Congress. Ring three judiciary, see it's kinda like my circus. Step right up and visit ring number one. The show's just begun, meet the president. I am here to see that the laws get done. The ringmaster of the government. On with the show. Hurry, hurry, hurry to ring number two. See what they do in the Congress. Passing laws and juggling bills. Oh, it's quite a thrill in the Congress. Focus your attention on ring number three. The judiciary's in the spotlight. The courts take the laws and they turn the tides, balancing the wrongs with your rights. No one part can be more powerful than any other is. Each controls the other, you see, and that's what we call checks and balance. Says, well, everybody's act is part of the show, and no one's job is more important. The audience is kinda like the country, you know, keeping an eye on their performance. Ring one executive, two is legislative, that's Congress. Ring three judiciary, see, it's kinda like my circus. My circus, I'm gonna have a three-ring circus someday. People will say it's a fine one, son. But until I get it, I'll do my thing. With government, it's got three rings.
All right, thanks Schoolhouse Rock for that. Articles 4 and 5 of the Constitution. Article 4 describes the relationship between the state and the national government. So it describes states' rights, the rights of citizens in other states. Article 5 is about amending the Constitution, so that is changing the Constitution, adding new rights to the Constitution, and it describes the supermajority requirements in order to get an amendment added to the Constitution. And our last two articles here, Article 6 and Article 7. Article 6 describes national debts, how they're going to be handled. The Supremacy Clause, which says the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and then the oaths of office for anyone who is elected into political office, the oaths that they have to take. Article 7 describes simply ratifying the Constitution. So they wrote the Constitution, it was debated, and it was discussed how they would have to ratify the Constitution. So back then, remember, there was only 13 states, so they decided 9 of the 13 states had to approve in order for the Constitution to be ratified. Amending the Constitution is providing the amendments that are at the end of the Constitution. So amendments are changes in the written words of the Constitution. Article 5 sets out these methods for how to change the Constitution. So proposal and ratification of the Constitution with amendments. And then there's 4 possible ways to create a formal amendment. I am not going to require you to know the formal amendment process. It's very difficult. It's only happened 27 times in US history, really, about 17 times because amendments 1 through 10 were all passed at the same time. It's very difficult because it requires so much approval. So it requires 2/3 approval in step number 1, and it requires 3/4 approval in step number 2. So getting all of Congress to agree on anything with 50% is difficult enough, but 2/3 and 3/4 is very difficult. These are the amendments to the Constitution. The first 10 amendments of the Constitution are known as the Bill of Rights. They set out a lot of our basic freedoms that we have in the United States. We're going to go over all 27 of these amendments later on this week. All of you will be choosing one amendment to do research on, and then we will be doing presentations on these amendments. Informal amendments are changes that have been made over time but aren't exactly written words that are changed in the Constitution. So these are changes based on basic legislation of Congress, actions taken by the president, decisions of the Supreme Court, activities of political parties, and custom. The president is able to use executive action, so they're able to use things like the military under their power of commander in chief. They're also able to create executive agreements, which are pacts made by our president with presidents or leaders of other foreign countries. And then the courts have major power in the United States. Our courts, specifically our Supreme Court, applies the Constitution in the cases that they hear, and they determine our laws and whether our laws are constitutional or not. So the Supreme Court has huge power because they're able to strike down laws that they believe are unconstitutional. That's how we've gotten a lot of our civil rights in this country. Like integrating schools, Brown versus Board of Education, or marriage equality, those decisions were made by the Supreme Court. Again, your Bill of Rights here is your first 10 amendments to the Constitution. They were all added together in 1791 to protect citizens' rights. And I'm just going to go over the First Amendment. I'm not going to go over the rest of the amendments, but the First Amendment is kind of having a moment right now with social media, so just decided that one was necessary to go over before our project. So the First Amendment is very long. It has like 5 things integrated into it. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of a religion or preventing the free exercise thereof, meaning that the government can't say we have a national religion. We don't have a national religion in the United States. People are free to practice whatever religion they want, and they can't prohibit you from practicing your religion. The government cannot abridge the freedom of speech, so you do have the freedom of speech from the government. Okay, so remember, the Constitution has to deal with the government, not private businesses. There is limitations to your free speech, especially when it infringes upon the rights of others. So independent companies can do what they like. They can set their rules and they can set their agreements. All of you who are using social media, you agree to abide by their rules. I know most of you don't read it, but when you download apps, there are those agreements that you say, like, scroll through and I agree to. You are agreeing to their limitations. Freedom of the press means that you have the ability to print or use social media, whatever it is that you are using to voice your opinions. You have the right of peaceful assembly. So if you would like, you can assemble, you can protest. Some of those rights are limited just based on, things like if you're going to have a march, they want to make sure that you have a permit so they can shut down the streets and make sure everyone is safe. But you do have the right to protest. And then you have the right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So if you're unhappy about something, you have the right to petition the government. So if you're unhappy about distance learning, you have the right to go to a school board meeting and voice your concerns at a school board meeting. You can petition the government. So all of that is just the First Amendment. And that's the end of your notes for today. We'll go over the rest of the amendments later on. Don't forget to write a summary, a couple sentences about what you learned.